I've always been drawn to places forgotten by time. Not ruins tourists clamor to see, but the ones swallowed by nature. Places where the past feels closer than the present. That's why, when I stumbled upon an overgrown trail in Blackwood Forest, I didn't hesitate. The trees arched like skeletal fingers, their leaves whispering warnings I chose to ignore. And then, I saw it. The moment I stepped onto the narrow path, a shiver ran down my spine. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a perfume of history that beckoned me deeper into the woods. I had heard stories about Blackwood Forest, tales of lost souls and ancient spirits, but I brushed them off as mere folklore. I was here for adventure, to capture the beauty of nature through my lens, not to chase shadows. As I ventured further, the sunlight began to fade, swallowed by the dense canopy above. The trail twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the forest. I could hear the distant call of birds, but their songs felt muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. And then, through the thicket, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart race. A structure, half hidden by vines and moss. It was a church, or what remained of one. The stone walls were crumbling, yet they held an eerie beauty, as if the building was a guardian of secrets long forgotten. The arched doorway stood ajar, inviting yet foreboding. I felt an inexplicable pull, a magnetic force urging me to step inside. My curiosity outweighed my caution, and I pushed the door open, the creak echoing like a warning through the silence. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the weight of history. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that filtered through shattered stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor. The pews were draped in cobwebs, and the altar lay in ruins, a testament to the passage of time. But what caught my attention were the strange symbols etched into the stone walls, markings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. As I explored, I felt a chill creep up my spine. It was as if the church was alive, breathing in the shadows that clung to its corners. I could hear the faintest sound, a whisper that seemed to echo from the very walls. I strained to listen, but the words were lost in the rustling of leaves outside. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and dread. Then, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Footprints in the dust leading toward a darkened corner of the church. They were fresh, as if someone, or something, had been here recently. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I wasn't alone. Just as I was about to turn back, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the edge of the shadows. It was cloaked in darkness, its features obscured. My breath caught in my throat. Was it a trick of the light, or was there truly something lurking in the depths of this forgotten place? I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to leave. But the door I had entered through was now closed, as if the church itself had sealed me inside. Panic surged through me, and I felt the weight of the past pressing down, urging me to uncover the secrets hidden within these walls. What had I awakened in this forsaken church? And more importantly, would I be able to escape its grasp? As I stepped closer to the church, a sense of unease washed over me. The structure loomed before me, not merely a relic of the past, but something that felt fundamentally wrong. The crumbling stone walls were entwined with thick tendrils of moss, as if nature was trying to reclaim what had been lost. Yet, amidst the decay, the cross atop the spire stood out, pristine and gleaming, as if it had been polished just moments before. It was a stark contrast to the surrounding ruin, a beacon of something that felt both sacred and sinister. The iron gate hung ajar, its rusted hinges creaking in the wind like a mournful wail. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest, but curiosity propelled me forward. As I pushed the gate open, it groaned in protest, echoing through the stillness of the forest. I stepped inside, the ground beneath my feet crunching with the remnants of fallen leaves and debris. Above the arched doorway, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. A Latin inscription carved into the stone. Hic Mane Umbra. The words translated to "Here dwells the shadow." I couldn't shake the feeling that the phrase was more than just a warning. It felt like a promise of something lurking just beyond my sight. Inside, The air was thick and heavy, laden with the scent of damp earth and decay. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of light that broke through the shattered stained glass windows, casting eerie patterns on the floor. The once vibrant colors of the glass were now muted, the images distorted by time and neglect. I could make out figures, angels, saints, and scenes of worship, but they seemed to watch me with hollow eyes, as if they were aware of my intrusion. As I ventured deeper into the church, I was struck by the overwhelming silence. It was as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The pews, long abandoned, were draped in cobwebs, and the altar lay in ruins, a testament to the passage of time. But it was the strange symbols etched into the stone that truly captivated me. They were unlike anything I had ever seen, twisted shapes and lines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I felt an inexplicable pull toward the altar, where a large, weathered book lay open, its pages yellowed and brittle. The text was written in a language I couldn't decipher, but the illustrations were haunting, depictions of rituals and figures that seemed to dance across the page. My fingers brushed against the paper, and a jolt of energy surged through me, as if the book were alive, resonating with the very essence of the church. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the small beam of light from my flashlight. Darkness enveloped me, and I felt a presence lurking just beyond my vision. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the silence now deafening. I could hear my own breath, quick and shallow, mingling with the distant sound of dripping water, drip, 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 echoing from somewhere deep within the church. I turned, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. Yet, the feeling of being watched intensified, prickling at the back of my neck. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but the allure of the unknown held me captive. What had I uncovered in this forsaken place? What secrets lay hidden within its walls, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to seek them out? As I stood there, caught between fear and fascination, I realized that this church was not merely a forgotten structure. It was a monument to something darker, a hidden monstrosity that had been waiting for someone to awaken it. And I was that someone. The door creaked open as if it had been waiting for me, a reluctant invitation into the unknown. As I stepped inside, the air hit me like a wall, thick and suffocating, saturated with the scent of damp rot and something metallic that made my stomach churn. Blood? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I pressed on, driven by a mix of dread and curiosity. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light that danced across the interior. The beam illuminated pews draped in cobwebs, their once polished surfaces now dulled by years of neglect. A shattered altar loomed at the front, its remnants scattered like broken dreams. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the very walls were steeped in sorrow and despair. But it was what lay beneath my feet that truly caught my attention. Fresh footprints marred the dust on the floor, leading deeper into the church. They were unmistakable, large, heavy prints that seemed to belong to someone or something far larger than a human. My heart raced as I followed the trail, each step echoing in the silence, a reminder that I was not alone in this forsaken place. Then came the sound, a wet, rhythmic drip, drip, drip from the rafters above. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. I looked up, scanning the ceiling for a source, but there was no leak, no sign of water. Just a patch of darkness thicker than the rest, pulsing like a living thing, as if it were breathing. The sound grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a primal instinct urging me to flee. But I couldn't turn back now. The footprints beckoned me forward, and I felt an inexplicable compulsion to uncover the truth hidden within these walls. I took a cautious step deeper into the church, my flashlight illuminating the grotesque beauty of the stained glass windows. The colors were muted, but the images they depicted were haunting. Angels with twisted faces, saints with hollow eyes, all watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. As I moved closer to the altar, the air grew colder, and the dripping sound intensified, echoing in my ears like a heartbeat. I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing in around me, wrapping around my limbs like tendrils, urging me to succumb to the darkness. I shook my head, trying to dispel the growing sense of dread, but it clung to me like a shroud. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the church, extinguishing my flashlight. I was plunged into darkness, the only sound the relentless drip, drip, drip that now seemed to come from all directions. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my phone, the screen casting a dim glow that barely penetrated the blackness. In that fleeting light, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows, a figure, tall and gaunt, standing just beyond the reach of my vision. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it a trick of the light, or was there truly something lurking in the depths of the church? The figure shifted, and I felt a rush of cold air wash over me, carrying with it a whisper that sent chills down my spine. It was a voice, low and guttural, echoing through the darkness. "Leave this place," it seemed to say, but the words were distorted, twisted into something unrecognizable. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The footprints were still there, leading deeper into the abyss, and I was torn between the urge to escape and the insatiable curiosity that had brought me here in the first place. What lay beyond the shadows? What secrets were waiting to be uncovered? As the darkness closed in around me, I realized that I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer just an observer. I was part of something far greater, something that had been waiting for me to enter its domain. And as the dripping sound continued its relentless rhythm, I knew that I was about to discover the true nature of the abyss I had entered. I wasn't alone. The realization hit me like a cold wave, paralyzing my thoughts and quickening my pulse. As I stood in the oppressive darkness, the air thick with dread, something shifted in the corner of my eye. A figure, draped in tattered robes, stood just beyond the reach of my phone's dim light. Its back was turned to me, and an instinctual fear gripped my heart. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling as it echoed through the empty church. No answer came, only the relentless drip, drip, drip that seemed to grow louder, as if mocking my fear. I took a cautious step forward, my breath hitching in my throat. The figure remained still, an unsettling silhouette against the backdrop of shadows. Then it turned its head. The movement was unnatural, too far, as if its neck had been twisted by some unseen force. I felt a chill race down my spine as I caught a glimpse of its face, or rather, the absence of one. Where features should have been, there was only a gaping hole, a void that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was a sight that defied comprehension, a horror that clawed at the edges of my sanity. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming at me to flee. But before I could turn, the figure took a step toward me, its movements fluid yet disjointed, like a marionette with tangled strings. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, but the door I had entered through had vanished. The once familiar entrance was now a solid wall, the stone cold and unyielding. The walls began to bleed black sap, oozing from the cracks like a living entity, sealing me in. I pressed my back against the cold stone, my heart racing as I frantically searched for another way out. The figure advanced, its presence suffocating, the air thickening with an overwhelming sense of dread. I could feel its gaze, even without eyes, boring into my soul, as if it were feeding off my fear. "Please let me go," I shouted, desperation lacing my voice. But the words fell flat in the oppressive silence, swallowed by the darkness that surrounded me. The figure paused, tilting its head as if considering my plea. The dripping sound intensified, echoing in my ears like a heartbeat, a countdown to something inevitable. In a moment of sheer terror, I turned and sprinted down the aisle, my feet pounding against the stone floor. I could hear the figure moving behind me, its footsteps a haunting echo that seemed to grow closer with each passing second. I didn't dare look back. I could feel its presence, a cold breath on my neck, urging me to run faster. I reached the altar, my mind racing for a way out. The book I had seen earlier lay open, its pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze. I grabbed it, hoping it held some clue, some incantation that could save me. But the words were indecipherable, swirling on the page like a dark fog. I could feel the figure closing in, the air growing colder, and I knew I had to act quickly. With a surge of adrenaline, I hurled the book at the figure, hoping to distract it long enough to find an escape. The moment it hit the ground, the figure paused, its head snapping toward the sound. I seized the opportunity and dashed toward a side door I hadn't noticed before, my heart pounding in my chest. As I pushed through the door, I felt the cold tendrils of darkness reach for me, but I slipped through just in time. I stumbled into a narrow corridor, the walls lined with more symbols and markings, but I didn't stop to examine them. I ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps, desperate to escape the nightmare that had come to life within the church. But as I fled, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only just begun to scratch the surface of the horrors that lay within. The figure was still out there, waiting, and I knew that this was far from over. As I stumbled through the narrow corridor, my heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears like a war drum. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, and the darkness seemed to close in around me, wrapping me in a shroud of fear. I could still feel the presence of that figure lurking just beyond my sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. But I pressed on, driven by a desperate need to understand what I had stumbled into. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, and as I stepped inside, my flashlight flickered back to life, illuminating the walls. What I saw made my blood run cold. Scrawled across the stone in what looked like charcoal were names, hundreds of them, some centuries old, etched into the very fabric of the church. Each name was a testament to a life once lived, a soul that had passed through this forsaken place. But beneath the names, something more disturbing caught my eye. A child's drawing, crudely rendered, depicted a grinning creature with too many teeth. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth stretched into a grotesque smile that sent chills down my spine. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized that this was no ordinary drawing. It was a warning, a glimpse into the darkness that resided within these walls. As I scanned the room, my gaze fell upon a weathered journal lying on a stone pedestal, its pages yellowed and brittle. I approached it cautiously, my fingers trembling as I opened the cover. The handwriting was frantic, the ink smudged as if the writer had been in a hurry. I began to read, my heart pounding with each word. Day 17, it mimics voices. Today, it sang my mother's lullaby. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel the weight of despair in the writer's tone, the desperation that had driven them to document their experience. I flipped through the pages, each entry revealing a descent into madness. The writer spoke of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, whispers echoing in the dark, and the feeling of being watched. It was clear that whatever dwelled within this church was not just a remnant of the past. It was alive, and it was learning. A cold breath touched my neck, and I froze, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I turned slowly, but there was nothing there, only the shadows that danced along the walls. My heart raced as I realized that the entity was not just a passive observer. It was actively engaging with me, learning from my fear, my confusion. It was feeding off my emotions, growing stronger with each passing moment. I felt a surge of panic as I recalled the drawing of the creature, its toothy grin now etched into my mind. What if it was more than just a figment of a child's imagination? What if it was a representation of the very thing that haunted this church? I had to escape, but the thought of retracing my steps filled me with dread. The figure I had encountered earlier was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I turned back to the journal, desperate for answers. The final entry was scrawled hastily, the ink running as if the writer had been in a frenzy. It knows my name. It calls to me. I can't escape. The words sent a chill through me, and I realized that I was not just a visitor in this place. I was part of its story, entwined in its dark history. With a surge of determination, I closed the journal and tucked it under my arm. I had to find a way out, to break free from the grip of this malevolent force. But as I turned to leave the chamber, I felt the air grow colder, the shadows deepening around me. The entity was learning, and I could sense its hunger. I was running out of time. Panic surged through me as I turned to leave the chamber, clutching the journal tightly against my chest. The shadows seemed to thicken, swirling around me like a living entity, and I could feel the entity's presence closing in. I had to escape. I sprinted down the corridor, my heart pounding in my ears, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I reached the main hall, I spotted the stained glass window I had seen earlier, its vibrant colors now dulled by grime and neglect. It was my only chance. Without thinking, I hurled myself at the window, the glass shattering with a deafening crash. Pain lanced through my arm as shards cut into my skin, but adrenaline fueled my escape. I crawled through the jagged opening, feeling the sharp edges bite into my flesh, but I didn't stop to assess the damage. I had to get out. Once outside, I tumbled into the underbrush, thorns tearing at my clothes as I scrambled to my feet. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the ever-present drip, drip, drip that seemed to follow me. I didn't look back. I ran, branches whipping against my face, the undergrowth snagging at my legs, but I pushed through, driven by sheer terror. I didn't stop until I hit the highway, the asphalt a stark contrast to the wild chaos of the forest. I collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for breath, my heart racing as I tried to process what had just happened. I was free. I had escaped the church, the darkness, the entity that had haunted me. But as I sat there, a sense of unease settled over me. I reached for my backpack, the familiar weight comforting in my hands. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was full of soil, dark, rich earth that I had never packed. Panic surged anew as I sifted through the dirt, my mind racing. How had it gotten there? I had been so focused on escaping that I hadn't even noticed it until now. That night, I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me like a second skin. I convinced myself that I was safe, that the horrors of the church were behind me. But as I lay in bed, exhaustion finally taking hold, I was jolted awake by a sound that sent chills down my spine. Finger marks appeared on my window, dark and smudged, as if something had pressed its face against the glass, watching me. I sat up, heart racing, and peered through the darkness. Outside, the shadow stood watching, its form indistinct but undeniably present. It held something in its hand, a torn piece of fabric, my shirt, the very one I had left behind in the church. My breath caught in my throat as I realized that I had not escaped at all. The entity had followed me, and it was not done with me yet. The shadow seemed to shift, its form flickering in the dim light, and I could feel its gaze piercing through the darkness, locking onto me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I scrambled back against the wall, my mind racing with fear and confusion. What did it want? Why was it here? In that moment, I understood the truth. The church had not just been a place of horror. It was a gateway, a connection between worlds. I had unwittingly crossed a threshold, and now the entity was free to follow me into my reality. I was trapped in a nightmare that refused to end, and the shadow was just the beginning. As I sat there, heart pounding, I realized that my escape had only led me deeper into the darkness. The church had left its mark on me, and I was now part of its twisted story. I had to find a way to confront the entity, to break the connection before it consumed me entirely. But as I stared into the darkness outside, I knew that the battle was far from over. As I lay in bed, the shadows of my room seemed to stretch and twist, echoing the darkness I had fled from. The events of that night replayed in my mind like a haunting melody, each note a reminder of the terror I had experienced. But now, a new question gnawed at me, one that I couldn't shake. Was the church ever really abandoned? Or does it choose who finds it? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I had stumbled upon that forsaken place, drawn in by an inexplicable force, as if the church had been waiting for me all along. It felt alive, a sentient entity that thrived on fear and despair. I couldn't help but wonder how many others had wandered into its grasp, lured by the same curiosity that had led me there. Were their names etched into the walls, their stories lost to time, just like the countless souls before me? Now, every time I closed my eyes, I heard it, the relentless drip, drip, drip that had haunted me in the church. It echoed in my mind, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. But it wasn't just the sound that haunted me, it was the voice that accompanied it. A voice that sounded almost like mine, whispering secrets I couldn't quite grasp. It called to me, a siren song that promised understanding, yet threatened to pull me back into the abyss. I could feel the entity's presence lingering, a shadow that refused to fade. It was as if I had become a part of its story, entwined in a web of darkness that I couldn't escape. The church had left its mark on me, and I knew that I would never truly be free. The question remained, would I succumb to the darkness, or could I find a way to confront it before it consumed me entirely? In the silence of the night, I realized that the true horror lay not in the church itself, but in the knowledge that I was forever changed, forever haunted by the choices I had made. And as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the church was still watching, waiting for the next curious soul to wander into its embrace.